I'd like to thank our great Creator who gave custodianship of this beautiful land and water to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge our traditional owners from as far north as the Torres Strait Islands to the south as far as South Cape in Tasmania, from as far west as Steep Point in Western Australia, and from as far east as Cape Byron in New South Wales. Let's show and pay respects to their elders past and present, and remember, for they hold the knowledge and the wisdom and the memories that has sustained this great South land since God created it.
Good morning from the Bendigo Salvation Army. Today it's great to have your company. As we enter into worship, let us enter into a call to worship.
Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God, and it is he who made us. And we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations.
Would you be free from your burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you or evil a victory win? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be free from your passion and pride? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Come for a cleansing to Calvary's tide. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be whiter, much whiter than snow? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Sin stains are lost in its life-giving flow. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you do service for Jesus, your King? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you live daily his praises to sing? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb.
I'm going to read just some verses from John chapter 4. John chapter 4. And I'll be picking up at verse 4, but this is where Jesus is travelling from Judea to Galilee. And verse 4 says he had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water." "But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and the well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water. Then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here and get water." "Go and get your husband," Jesus told her. "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. Jesus said, "You're right, you don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth." "Sir," the woman said, "you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim, where our ancestors worshipped?" Jesus replied, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus told her, "I am the Messiah." May God add his blessing to those words today. So today we're week 2 of our national prayer focus, which is about being Jesus-centred. And if we're wanting to be Jesus-centred, we have to worship him. To be Jesus-centred, we need to worship him. Now, if you haven't clicked to it, next week is the beginning of the AFL final series. Some of you are looking excited by that, and some of you are going, "Oh, here we go again. Worst month of the year." But some people get right into it, don't they? You might have seen a few cars around town that they've decorated their whole car up in their team colours. Some people just, that's all they live for, is their footy team. But people get fanatical about other things. It may be about a band or about, foodies with all the things like MasterChef and things like that. And when you get passionate about something, you can always buy some merch, can't you? And I'm sure if we were to go to every one of your houses, you'd have some merch of something from some passion in your life. It may be some sporting merch, or it may be some special olive oil that's garlic infused or something like that, or it might be a special limited edition record, or it could be a whole range of different things. So when we talk about worship, worship is essentially what we put in the highest place of priority in our life. And for a lot of people, everyone will have something that's the most important thing in their life. It may be family, it may be a band, it may be their sporting team, it may be a passion of some sort of hobby. It could be a range of, it could be their work. It could be their career. We worship essentially what we say we cannot live without. In a sense, we worship the thing that is the number one thing in our lives. Now, if there's nothing that will get in my way of attending the footy, then that is the most important thing. Or if there's nothing that will stop me going to the gym, then that's the most important thing. If I'm centering Jesus in all I do, then he will be the focus of our life. It's interesting that if you were to read the 10 Commandments, the first two are essentially about worshipping God. The first one says, don't have any other God but me. And the second is, don't make an idol. So don't worship other stuff that you make. Worship me. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. One thing I haven't mentioned, but another thing that can actually become something we worship other than Jesus is actually our church, the church or Christianity. And you can get Christian merch. And sometimes we can fall into the trap of worshipping the church rather than the person behind the church, who is Jesus. When Jesus, one of the people that Jesus often got angry with in the Bible were the Pharisees, and they were people that sort of, I guess, made church their religion was really what they worshipped, and they would parade around the streets, letting everyone see how good they are. But if we are centering our lives on Jesus, it's not about showing off or making a show of the religious things we do, but rather it's being filled with the fruit of the Spirit and having the light of Jesus' love shining through us. So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Jesus says in Matthew 5:16 to let our light shine before others that they may see your good deeds. We don't do good deeds in the Salvation Army because we want to be good people. We do good deeds because that's how we show our love, our worship to Jesus. So what we worship is what we put our highest priority on. Where this becomes important is because what we worship becomes who we are. If you become a worshipper of the Collingwood Football Club, you'll find that your teeth start to fall out. Oh, sorry. I'll take that one back. That's not quite true. But it's true, isn't it? Whatever we worship starts to become part of what we are. Like they say, what you are, what you eat. Well, essentially we are what we worship. And it becomes part of our identity. So if we frame something as a must, as in, well, I must scroll through social media the moment I wake up, or I must make that footy game on Saturday, or I must be at that work meeting, or I must gain their approval, or I must look like I'm a good Christian, that starts to become part of who we are. And when you really think about it, we don't really want to become like some of those things. There's a lot of negative things with that. But if we make Jesus the centre of our life, the same's true. We start to then become like Jesus. And the way to be like Jesus isn't by trying hard to be good. Rather, it's by worshipping him. And as we worship him, we naturally start to become like him. If we try to be good through willpower, we will fail. But if we just make Jesus the centre of our life, we will start to be more and more like him. Those who are Jesus-centred place Jesus in the position of highest priority in their life. Those who are Jesus-centred fix their gaze on him. Those who are Jesus-centred have Jesus at the top of their list. Those who are Jesus-centred say they cannot live without him. Those who are Jesus-centred frame Jesus as a must. Now, sometimes I've often heard throughout my life within the church that people will say you should have Jesus first, and then you might have your family a second, and then maybe the church or work, and you start to have a list of everything in order, but Jesus at the top. But I heard someone say once that Jesus shouldn't be on the list. Rather, Jesus should be over all the list. He should be not the top of the list, but he should be in everything on the list. So Jesus is number one when it comes to family. Jesus is number one when it comes to work. Jesus is number one when it comes to church, and so on. Jesus is the centre of it all. In a sense, if you were to draw it as a diagram, you've got the circle there, you've got Jesus at the centre, and the rest of your life sort of sits around the circle with him at the middle of it all. So we need to make Jesus the centre of everything. One of our daughters, well, we've got a few of our daughters are getting into the Korean, what do they call it? K-pop. And one of them's even learning Korean. Not deliberately, but it's just learning it through osmosis. And it's the same as we make Jesus the centre of our life. We essentially, his character becomes our character through osmosis. His spirit becomes within us, and naturally we start to display his nature. But because worship is so important, it's the first thing that Satan will always try to attack within the life of a Christian. If he can stop us worshipping, he's won the battle. He's won the battle. And so often the greatest challenge we have as Christians is to engage in worship, whether it's corporate worship like this or worship in our natural daily life. Because naturally, I don't know if you've noticed it, but if you don't work at something, you naturally start to drift in the opposite direction. So if you don't work on being physically active, you start getting unfit and unhealthy, and you start to drift in a negative direction. And so we need to make sure we don't start to drift when it comes to worshipping Jesus. In Luke chapter 10, 38 to 42, there's a short little interaction Jesus has with two ladies named Mary and Martha. And Mary sits at Jesus' feet and she's listening to every word that Jesus is saying and taking it all in. But Martha's racing around, being busy, getting something ready for Jesus to eat. And in being so busy doing all this for Jesus, she doesn't get to be with Jesus. You may have found that if you've been hosting an event like a party or a Christmas dinner or something, you have all your family and friends come over and you're so busy racing around doing it all that you actually never get to actually spend time with the people that you've invited to come and be with you. And with our lives, there's this natural tendency towards being busy that takes us away from being Jesus-centred. And we start to go into autopilot. Think about the first hour of your day. How much of that first hour do you actually think about? Or do you just suddenly you're through that hour and you've just done what you do every other day? We just get into autopilot. Sometimes if you're driving, you get into autopilot and you suddenly go half an hour later, how did I get here? That's a worry, I don't know. That always worries me when that happens. But we get into this autopilot mode and we can suddenly get through the whole day and we haven't even thought about Jesus. Now we need routines. It'd be awful, wouldn't it, if you woke up and then you had to spend half an hour deciding, do I brush my teeth first, or do I have a shower first, or do I have breakfast first, or do I get up from the left side of the bed or the right side of the bed? You'd be exhausted by the time you get through the first hour because of all the decisions you make. That's why we have routine. But we then need to try and develop those routines that help us to remain Jesus-centred. Now, having things like a prayer time or a quiet time in the morning or at some point during the day, there's nothing magical about that. But by making it a routine, it starts to help us make this be Jesus-centred every day. Coming to church like this on a Sunday, there's nothing magical about coming to church. We don't have to come together to worship God. But by doing it, we're encouraging each other and creating a routine that reminds us that we live our lives for Jesus. As soon as we start to pull ourselves away from the family of God, we start to drift away often from Jesus. When Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, he said, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. In a sense, Jesus is saying we must approach worship of him with authenticity and intentionality. We need to be real when we come to Jesus, but we also need to do it intentionally. Worship's not a thing we do, but it's a lifestyle that we live, which prioritizes Jesus. It's not something we can do passively. You can sit down and watch TV or YouTube or anything like that. TikTok nowadays, isn't it? I've never looked at TikTok. But you can sit there and an hour can just pass, and you do it passively. You don't have to think, you just sit there and it happens. Worship's not like that. You can't just sit and let worship happen around you. Worship's something we must do. Our worship cannot be authentic unless Jesus holds the place of highest priority. Denominations, traditions, sacraments, music styles, uniforms, flags, they all have their place, but they do not matter the most. They must not become our priority if we are to truly and authentically worship Jesus. Jesus must take his rightful place on the throne of your life. Jesus should be the only must in our life. There's a thing within the Anglican Church called the Westminster Catechism. And it's a work that was written to teach the people about the doctrines that Christians are to believe about God and how we must live in response according to the Church of England. And one question this Westminster Catechism asks is this: what is man's chief end? In other words, what is the purpose of humanity? What is the purpose of life? Why are you here on this earth? Why are you alive? And this is how this catechism articulates our purpose. It says our chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Ernie talked about the fact that when we're suddenly doing what God wants us to do, it's not work, it's something we enjoy. And our purpose of living is to glorify God, in other words, to worship him and enjoy him forever, not just in this life, but for all eternity, even beyond death. Unlike the worship of earthly things, the worship of God does not come at the expense of abundant life. But we must worship him authentically. We must glorify him authentically. We must place Jesus at the centre of our worship and be shaped by worshipping him in response. So I encourage you to think about what is it in your life that you need to start to create a rhythm, a routine to help Jesus be the centre of all that you are and all that you do.
Burning, burning, brightly burning, brightly burning, fire divine, satisfy my spirit's yearning, fill this empty soul of mine. Burning, burning, deeply burning, deeply burning, in me. You are the light. You are the light. You are the fire. And you are burning, burning. You are the light. You are the light. You are the fire. And you are burning in me. You are the light. You are the light. You are the fire. And you are burning in me.
Well, thank you for joining with the Bendigo Salvation Army today as we heard that message. I hope that that encourages you today. And if you'd like to find a community of your own, if you'd like to find your church community of your own, then you're welcome to get into contact with us at the Salvation Army. That's salvationarmy.org.au/Bendigo. Otherwise, if you'd like information on volunteering or pastoral care or some emergency relief needs, then you can also visit that same website at salvationarmy.org.au/Bendigo. We wish you all the best for your week to come. A benediction for you as you go throughout your day. May the love of God surround you as you go out and return to your daily life. May Jesus always stand before you with an invitation to know him and to follow him. May the Spirit give you wisdom and grace for the journey and kindle your imagination. And may the love of this community be like a warm cloak to shield you from despair and keep you strong in hope. Amen.